Great. So thanks both of you for joining me here. Peter, maybe I could start with you. Just put you here in the middle. You said that CSRD doesn't, or these kind of regulatory standards don't create sustainability, but they expose a reality.
Exactly.
So how do once companies sort of engage in this exposure of reality, this transparency, how can they use those insights? How does it change operational decision making actually within the organization?
Well, actually, as with anything, and also especially in the sustainability area, in the past, a lot of those issues, they just never occurred. They hadn't been on the menu, basically, of the management. And once you create transparency, you will see a lot of gaps in your own operations. And the question then is how you handle those gaps. You can just acknowledge those gaps. You can just try to pay a little money to compensate for some of those gaps, or you can try to solve them and then turn it out to be a competitive advantage. There are a lot of areas in which you then realize that, and this is something for our company at Bosch, which is now really much in the focus, is tools or instruments like circular economy can help you to close those gaps, make you more resilient, and by the way, also create a lot of additional turnover in the end, or reduce your sourcing costs. So a lot of topics in sustainability are often tied to operational costs, and they are one type of class you can put on to basically address those topics.
And especially issues around sort of, I imagine, efficiency,
yes,
additional resilience within your organization.
Exactly.
I mean, how about within your specific organization, Bosch? Can you talk about a little bit about your own experience and what sort of surprised you most when you started to see the effects of CSRD as sort of a management mechanism to
Well, I think, and this is hard to put it on one individual take or realization. The one thing you realize, especially also with the sustainability classes, is how much all of those kind of processes are interrelated to each other, and how if you progress in those fields, you see a lot of not direct but indirect gains in other topics, especially the topic of resilience. Now, again, we are experiencing this, the Strait of Hormuz, and what if the cargo ships are not moving, and all of these kind of things. Investing in resilience gives you the possibility to breathe in these kind of situations and not have to rely again on fast emergency air freights and whatever, which just cost you so much money. This is just multiple times which you invest in increasing your resilience.
Great. Emma, I mean, you've worked with lots of companies preparing for CSRD compliance, and certainly you've raised these concerns about that the first wave of reporting requirements, kind of pushes company to focus on data points, maybe more than what truly matters. So let's talk about what's genuinely material, genuine materiality. So how can companies sort of rediscover that materiality given all this complexity?
Yeah, and I think if we step back to pre-omnibus, I mean, it was something like 1,000 data points a company would have had.
And omnibus, just to clarify, is the 2025 change of simplification?
Yeah, simplification process. So pre that, there was something like 1,000 data points that a company may have to disclose on, which is a ridiculous amount of data points if you're not like a really mature company that's been doing this for decades. So when we look at what is truly material, and I heard the guy from the IFRS say this once on stage, he used the litmus test, which I now use as well, if something's truly material and you have an incident in that topic, you're going to be picking up the phone to your board and you're going to be escalating that immediately to your investors or your board. That is what defines a material topic. So when we look at helping clients understand what's a material topic, the first place I start is what's your enterprise risk management say? What thresholds have you got in your enterprise risk management? How's that structured? And if they haven't got an enterprise risk management with one nice little matrix, then we get their kind of risk managers or business continuity people, their legal team in a room to discuss that topic and really understand, is it £1 million for that company? Is it 10 million? Is it 250 million? What is going to stop business? And then that is the material topic. And then that's the lens that you look at all of the topics through for CSRD. And ISSB, when we really shouldn't forget about ISSB because it's galloping up fast. I mean, CSRD was the big kid in town, but CSRD is now, ISSB is now in 36 jurisdictions, 17 of which have like firmly put that in place. So, you need to get your ship in order, not just for Europe, but for your global operations. And that's where I think the real efficiencies that you've talked about can come to play, because if you look at it not just for Europe, but for the rest of your business, and you magnify that up across, you can make those really tangible savings.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about sort of the, at least the arguments around competitiveness that CSRD brought was this sort of Brussels effect thing, right? That maybe sort of European, those who were then subject to CSRD would be at the forefront as it took on elsewhere. And clearly these additional jurisdictions are maybe some kind of sort of vindicate that point.
And they're not all the same. They're all under the guise of ISSB, but they're all slightly different. They've all got slightly different dates and phasing in and penalties. And so one of the first things we do is kind of almost like a bit of a throwaway kind of starter block is mapping it all out and helping clients understand what they've got to do when and what are the penalties if they don't do it. And I think that's the starter for 6, really.
And so in practice, as you've brought companies through this process, I mean, it has yielded, just in terms of exposing those particular risk areas and making them think about it, has immediately brought materiality to the board and value to them before anything.
Absolutely. And don't do materiality. I mean, there's lots. You can, I guess, software tools. You can get AI to tell you what your material topics are, but that's not going to give you some insights. And if you haven't got a big budget, then that's a great place to start. But the most powerful thing our clients have fed back to us isn't the materiality matrix that we give them at the end, and it isn't the report that we give them at the end. It's actually them sitting through the stakeholder insights that we do as part of the DMA. Mm-hmm. So we go out to their internal stakeholders, their customers, their suppliers, and really sitting down with those people and understanding what these topics mean for those different departments in different parts of the world, because it's not the same in Thailand as it is for Europe. So you need to understand the differences in materiality, not just from a financial point of view, but from an operational and geographic point of view. And then you need to stitch it all together.
So Peter, I mean, what she's talking about is the benefit of increasing communication, obviously, between departments, between different functions, between different parts of the business operating in different jurisdictions. But it seems like the transparency can also create some friction in some cases. I mean, I think that when organizations start to expose this environmental footprint, it can create, let's say, a resistance that might appear. So do you see that there's sort of resistance that happens when leadership begins to engage with sort of the reality that comes up from
this is
these insights?
In the end, any corporate entity is also a social being. Mm-hmm. And just consider your kids at home. If you tell them to tidy up their rooms, there is immediate resistance. Mm. However, once it's tidied up, they just realize, oh, I find something, I don't have to search for it. Mm. So yes, of course, there is a lot of resistance, especially also in corporations like we are a really engineering-driven company with a lot of highly educated, very smart engineers who done this for 30 years. Mm. And now you tell them to do it differently or to report it. Yes, there is a lot of resistance. And you have to constantly engage and speak with the people. You have to form coalitions. You have to see that it's really interfunctional, interdepartment, really up from across the levels. You'll oftentimes find more engagement, especially with the younger people in the company who are, well, they are more aware of this. They are not so much path-driven as the others. And yes, it's a lot. So sustainability work is a lot of conviction work and proving that there is really a business case. It's not only piling up some numbers to have something signed from somebody and then you are done. No, it's really something which you can work. And the bigger the company, most probably the bigger the friction there is.
Can I bounce off that
Please.
a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you talked about tidying your kid's bedroom.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask the audience, if you tidied your bedroom up and you found €1 million, would you be happy? Yeah, you're going to be pretty chuffed with that, right? Okay. So just on that analogy, so for an organisation that operates in 20 geographies, we looked at their energy management systems across those 20 geographies, and we looked at this thing called non-commodity costs, which is the bit that is put on the bill above the cost of electricity. That data in those 20 geographies was scattered all around the place. So you pulled that together, you tidied your bedroom up, you looked at those non-commodity costs, and we saved over €1 million for that particular client in reducing those non-commodity costs. So tidy your bedrooms up. There might be €1 million there.
I guess the question is how much it costs to tidy your bedroom.
It wasn't €1 million.
It wasn't €1 million. But,
I wish it was.
And this is where I think the alignment of data. So that's, again, something I want to talk about. So there's a question of aligning the data within the organization where you might see mismatches. And then, of course, these things get audited. The question is it then finally comparable to others? So can we talk about that data alignment question? Is this one where, first, can you tell me what the biggest challenges, the benefits are, but also where can technology, or have you found that the application of technology to help to align or make comparable this data across systems has been useful, or maybe reduce that cost of tidying the bedroom? Maybe start with you.
Yep, sure. I think I heard on a different panel earlier on, data is king. We've all heard the adage, you can't measure, can't manage what you don't measure and all of that sort of stuff. And I think, so you have to have a data management system, but I don't think you should be paralyzed by it, because we see a lot of companies in pursuit of excellence, and they spend 2 years implementing a system, and then by the time they've actually implemented the system, it's gone out of date and there's some new AI technology that's come in. And so I think it's just get on, use whatever you've got. If you're a small SME, Excel is fine. Excel did a perfect job for a number of years. If you're a big global organization, you're probably going to be wanting an enterprise type system and something that's a little bit more robust. And something that's auditable as well. But Excel can be auditable. So don't get sold into the fact that you have to have one of these fancy pants systems out there. You can do it on Excel. But get your data, start measuring it. And whatever, if you're a small business, just start measuring it. If you're a big business, start measuring it. Just start small and build and improve it. It's a bit like scope 3. You start with spend-based. Which is, just pulling data off your ERP and sales system, and then you kind of think, okay, fine, I need something a bit better than that. So you go to activity data and you start getting PCFs and things like that. And, but that process takes years, so just get going in your data.
And I wonder the degree, and you're right, these fancy pants systems maybe are not good for sort of some of the SMEs out there. But I wonder the degree to which some of that data regularization can happen through these large platforms. A lot of these cloud for sustainability things that are out there that large companies start to use. Because I look at what are the areas of convergence, and it would be sort of similar tools for data usage and things like auditing, right? Where you have something that's sort of several people that are looking at different versions of carrying this data. I wonder what you think is then the either the difficulties on the data side, or where you can see that it converging most obviously.
Well, first of all, also big global multinational companies really like Excel. So
That's great.
if you start with something everybody can use, and this is Excel. And once even if you are starting with macros in Visual Basic, then I think you lose 90% of the people. So easy Excel works, and you get 80% done with Excel. And yes, then step by step, if you have data exchange in all different tables and SAP systems, yes, then you need a little bit more sophisticated tools. But the tool in the end, I think, is secondary. The important thing is, and there I see convergence is especially that we agree on what or how to apply the ISO standards, for example, especially if you talk about PCF. So I was for 3 years part of the Casina X Sustainability Board, and there we had a big also stream concerning PCF. And in the end, what we did in Casina X, basically, we wrote a recommendation how to really implement the ISO standard for PCF. And this is now, I think, the 4th iteration, and also in alignment with all the different other companies. We are now seeing that also auditing based on these standards is happening, and OEMs are applying it. And we are aligning this also with all the other big companies together for sustainability and all the other kind, that in the end we have more or less the same understanding. However, then the tools, those are secondary. So they are big external tools which you can buy. And I'm a little bit, well, I cannot really tell what I think about buying a tool or building up something on your own, because if you build something up, and we decided within Bosch to build up our own PCF tool, which helps the engineers. And yes, in the end, it might be a little bit more expensive than just pull something out of an available shelf. But what you do when you build it up on your own, you create the expertise. You really know what goes in and what goes out. You know much more about the impact factor than if you just have some cloud-based solution and then you connect it and then you get a figure, and then so what? So now I have a figure, but I need to have those figure decrease. And when I look at our journey starting in 2018 to today, well, I don't think we would have decreased our scope 1 and 2 by almost 90%. Or our scope 3 by 35% if we just would have pulled some tools out of the shelf. So if you go through the pain to understand what goes in and all these nitty-gritty details which there are, then you find this million on the floor, mayhaps, or not in euros, but then in tons of CO2.
So the process of counting creates operational advantage in itself. That's really, I mean, speaking about operational advantage, I want to talk a little bit, you mentioned supply chain resilience.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about circularity.
Yep.
Obviously circular economy initiatives are framed often as environmental responsibility, but they also are about things like supply chain resilience. Can you talk a little bit about circularity as a risk management concept in a world of scarce materials?
Yes, of course. So first of all, I'm coming out of the mobility aftermarket division of Bosch, and we are very much in the first place merchants. So everything which we do is to do a business. And circularity, first of all, is a very profitable business, and it can be applied in a lot of areas. But if you just look at what is the principle of circularity, and this is why it is so sustainable, is you look at something like, for example, a starter or a power electronic, whatever, so big parts of a steering gear of a car, then you look at it and you see, okay, this is a big metal piece with some small other things attached, mayhaps some rubber parts, some parts which have some kind of wear characteristics. So at some point the steering does not work anymore, but it does not work because the big thing would be broken. So your metal core normally does not break, but there are other auxiliaries which need to be replaced. And then if you have this part and it has a value of 200 euros and there is, I don't know, 10 kilograms of steel and whatever in, well, you can basically reuse 90% of this piece. And this means, especially if we talk about electronics, where we have all these scarce materials in, and also especially magnets, so neodymium is basically 90% plus coming out of China. Well, if you can reuse it, well, you are much more independent from your supply base, which always, even if the part is finally assembled in Europe, you will at least get 1/3 of the smaller components out of Asia. So we have no part anymore in this globe, no matter where you are, perhaps in North Korea, but no other area where everything comes out of your local area. Everything is interconnected. And what we have seen then, for example, when here the Suez Channel was blocked due to this drunken captain who just tried to turn around in the channel. Well, our circular economy part still had been available. Also during when Russia invaded Ukraine. These parts, they are just more available because you are not dependent on, well, you have 10% or sources for which you need parts, but the 90% is still there. And and also the other thing is, of course, you are much closer to your end customer because your customer becomes your supplier. So this also makes you better understand your customer. And last thing for resilience in this case, if you take back the old parts, you know what is really sold, and you do not have several warehouse levels in between. So we also have a much better demand forecast and demand information if you take back the old parts. So this is the last thing, and this of course helps in your planning a lot.
Emma, I mean, what Peter's talking about, I think, is very interesting, which is sort of where aligning sort of sustainability priorities with business strategy helps the companies to strengthen their relationship with clients and sort of downstream relationships in the value chain. Can you sort of discuss what makes that alignment credible in practice and helps win business in a...
Yeah, certainly. So I mean, I'll give you a bit of an example. So sorry to keep harping on about DMAs, but it was through the DMA process. I'll back up a little bit. So we have a client. They are a major FM company. They are very proud about their people strategy. They actively hire from ex-military and for people with disabilities. And they're really, really proud of this, and rightly so. But what they hadn't realised was that they had internalized that. They were proud of it because it was their people and they were proud of their people. But what they hadn't necessarily made the link of was actually that it was a commercial advantage and differentiator for them in their marketplace and their sector. So when we went out to the DMA and we were talking about all the material topics and we talked about diversity and inclusion, which I know is not a good phrase in some countries now, this topic came up, their people strategy and their hiring strategy. And we were talking to one of their clients, the NHS, about this this strategy. And they actively said that is why we placed the contract with this company was because of the people strategy. And also what they have is because of the people with disabilities and ex-military, they have a more, sometimes they need time off work due to PTSD and things like that. So they don't run a lean staff. They run with enough capacity that if someone goes off sick, they can instantly replace them. And again, that's in there, it gave them that operational resilience in that contract to, and it was recognized by the client. They said, we love the fact that you run decent sized teams and you're not running a skeletal staff that if something goes wrong, then, bang, you're kind of out. So they really, through this whole process, which was triggered by CSRD, they realized that what they thought was a proud internal thing was actually a commercial differentiator. This
is the old magic of the Mittelstand. I mean, that was the German magic of hiring back in the day. Great. I mean, I do want to open it for questions just in a moment, but maybe so please think of one while we're waiting here. But maybe let me just. Let's just close with, from the policy perspective, obviously CSRD has gone through big change last year. In the UK, they're looking at sort of SRS now. And so it'd be interesting to think about what are lessons to sort of get the balance right in terms of the reporting burden versus having policy inconsistency that might cause problems or resentment or whatever. What are sort of maybe the big wish list, or how can we tweak the system as it is now, either looking to SRS or making CSRD better to maximize the benefits?
For companies, I think companies are doing a lot of great stuff already. I heard someone else on a panel saying it's about labeling. It's about kind of labeling what you're already doing. So I would say continue bringing teams together, continue not working in silos. I think we are moving towards, not breaking down those silos and having legal and finance and sustainability and engineering working together on a joint program. So that we should really continue to do that. I think let's try and resist seeing compliance as a tick box exercise. I think if companies do that, then compliance will always be a cost to the business. But if you see compliance as a trigger to enable teams to work together, then you can go looking for those treasure hunts. You can go looking for the benefits to the business through circular economy. You can go looking at those new revenue streams that might have been brought about by climate change. You can really go and identify all of those things, and it can be a cost plus for the business.
Do you think reducing the obligation on SMEs, for example, last year is so doing them a disservice by not having to go through the point?
Potentially.
Really?
I think because the whole thing is it's about controlling risk, yes, but also about the companies I've worked with, it's about identifying the opportunities for their business. And helping them understand that things like climate change aren't just necessarily I'm going to write a big report on climate change and say where all my risks are and how I'm managing it and governing it. Actually, okay, fine. There's new technology coming out here that might be an opportunity for our business. That same FM company, whilst they have to report their scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, that's the compliance bit. But actually they realised that there's a massive revenue opportunity to help their clients reduce their own emissions. And again, it's a value add.
Yeah, and there is a rationale exactly of this sort of downstream. So even if it's not a requirement, that sort of downstream through the scope 3 pressure comes still a requirement to tackle some of those issues. Yes, please, question up here in the front. Do we have a mic, please, in the back? Or just maybe pipe up, yeah.
So it's just a lot of data that is collated, that is reported, but then it's like it's just so what, and then what, that I'd love to hear how is it that a company like Bosch does amazing work. How do you move from, okay, we've collected this, we've reported on this, and this is what we're going to do next. This is so what.
How do you sort through all of this data? You have 1 million reports, and then how do you operationalize?
Well, first of all, yes, it was an initial investment. In the meantime, we have data platforms which are basically connecting all our ERP systems and generating a lot of figures. But through the efforts of basically building the systems, we know basically our trigger points. We have, and this is important, the commitment of the board that we continue to invest. And our money spent is basically into improvements efforts. And for this, we basically collect different measures. We have different possibilities to get them out of different areas, and then we sort them. And we have marginal abatement curves and all these kind of nice tools. And then you go step by step and you do as much as possible with the available budget. But there is plenty of additional things which are coming just and second in line then maybe for next year.
Great. Well, we're just, it looks like over time now. So maybe we'll have to close. There's a couple of interesting questions here on the screen. Well, maybe actually, Emma, if we can do quickly, do you want to take the first one? Because if we all agree the science tells us that the climate crisis here is reporting on 1,000 data points, not a necessary response.
I fundamentally, we shouldn't be reporting on 1,000 data points. I'm sorry, you can argue with me afterwards if you want, but we absolutely should not be reporting on 1,000 data points. What we should be doing is looking at what is really important, and we should be adapting to climate change. I'm passionate about, yes, we need to mitigate and we need to do all the counting of, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. We need to be adapting now. We need to be spending that money on actually adapting our business for the climate change that is here. And if we're not doing that, then we are falling really behind. So please adapt.
I think that's a really good message to end on. And I am happy that sort of at the end of this couple of days where I've heard lots of opinions about regulatory and reporting requirements and whether they're a burden or not, usually that they are. I really appreciate ending today on an optimistic view that the competitiveness that it can drive within organizations is real and discoverable. I mean, that there's $1 million from cleaning up your room. And also very much take also the resilience and risk mitigation aspect of it. And especially right now, I mean, if you're not getting that, the costs of not being resilient doesn't slap you in the face, it's going to be now. So thanks very much, both of you, Peter Lukassen and Emma Arnold, for joining me. And let's give a round of applause.